Hello friends, today we are going to discuss an important political philosopher of ancient India, Kautilya. In the last class we have seen that there are three important political philosophers in ancient India, Manu, Kautilya and Gautama Buddha. Among these three philosophers, Kautilya is considered as a serious philosopher, political philosopher who has pondered over his views on the origin of state, the statecraft, and various aspects of administration, and various aspects of foreign relations, and so on. Kautilya has mentioned Saptanga theory in his works. Kautilya was an ancient philosopher and who wrote a book called Arthashastra. Arthashastra is the great book written by Kautilya. As we all know that Indians, the Hindu order of Indians, believe that there are four important goals in every human life: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Among them, artha deals with economy and political economy. So he wrote this book on Arthashastra, in which he has also mentioned about dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So these are the four important objectives of human life. Among them, artha is considered as a lifeline of all the four important goals of human life. So he wrote a book on Arthashastra. In this book, he has made a mention about the state, the formation of state, and various political ideas, and the formation of various political institutions and political structures. And he has also mentioned about the origin of state, the functions of state, and statecraft, and the organization of administration, and so on. So this is how Kautilya has mentioned in his Arthashastra the famous theory called the Saptanga theory. It states that the state has 7 elements. In the Western philosophy, the Westerners have believed that the state has only 4 elements. But the ancient Indian philosophy believes that the state need to have 7 elements. So these 7 elements are called as the Saptanga theory. Kautilya mentioned about the Saptanga theory in his great work, Arthashastra. Arthashastra is a great work written by Kautilya. Kautilya was an ancient Indian philosopher. As we all know about these philosophers, Manu, Kautilya, and Gautama Buddha are the 3 important ancient philosophers. And Kautilya is believed to have been in 4th century BC. So this is how Kautilya maybe belonged to 4th century BC, and his life has remained as a topic of research, and some people have believed that he belongs to 2nd century BC, and some others believe that he has belonged to 3rd century BC. But most of the researchers have believed that Kautilya belonged to the 4th century BC. In fact, the ancient Indian philosopher Kautilya can be compared with the modern Western philosopher Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli of Italy. So these 2 philosophers have almost the same type of thinking and political ideas. So many researchers and political scientists have drawn parallels between Machiavelli and Kautilya. Both Machiavelli and Kautilya have mentioned about the human nature and the negative points of the human nature, the dark picture of the human nature. And they have also mentioned about the state aggrandizement and the extension of state. So this is how Kautilya and Machiavelli both have believed in the state aggrandizement, and both have the quality of separating religion from politics and separating politics from morality. Separation of politics from morality and religion is an important aspect both in Machiavelli and Kautilya. So this is how many parallels are there between Machiavelli and Kautilya. So many people, many researchers, many political philosophers and scientists have believed that the modern Western Italian thinker Niccolo Machiavelli has parallels and comparisons between Machiavelli and ancient Indian philosopher Kautilya. So this is an important aspect. And Kautilya may be belonging to 4th century BC. And as I was telling you, there is still a great deal of research going on the life of Kautilya. But still, many researchers have believed that he belongs to 4th century BC. But some other philosophers like political scientists and Indologists have believed that Kautilya might be belonging to 2nd century BC to 2nd century AD, between 2nd century BC to 2nd century AD. But most of the philosophers, most of the researchers, most of the political scientists have believed that Kautilya might have been belonging to the 4th century BC. And some scholars even identify Kautilya with Chanakya. Chanakya is the prime minister of the Chandragupta Maurya in ancient India, and Chanakya also has the same qualities of Kautilya. So there are also scholars who identify Kautilya with Chanakya. And some people believe that Chanakya is only Kautilya and Kautilya is Chanakya. So this is how there's a great deal of research still going on whether Kautilya is same as Chanakya or not. So some scholars even today identify Kautilya with Chanakya. Chanakya, as I have told you, is the prime minister in the court of Chandragupta Maurya in the Mauryan Empire. So Arthashastra, the great work written by Kautilya, is a prominent work due to different reasons. It is a work on political stability. Arthashastra is a prominent work due to its concerns on political stability. In fact, Machiavelli, as Kautilya, have pondered over various aspects of instability, and they gave in some certain suggestions for the prince on making political stability. So political stability is the goal of any state, and for maintaining political stability, what are the positive things and negative things that the king might have to do. So he has a lot of concerns on political stability. So Arthashastra is a great work that has suggested many things on political stability. And likewise, it has also concerned about the sovereign powers of the king. So Indian society particularly is a society divided into Chaturvarna system. There are 4 varnas in Indian society: the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. So Chaturvarna system is very strongly prevailing in Indian society. And besides this, there are also certain landed gentry in Indian society. And there are small kings and kingdoms, and there were Janapadas, there were Ganatantras, Ganas, Ganarajas here and there. So a king should be autonomous from all the structures of dominance in the society. So how the king has to maintain its sovereign powers is really a concern of the kingdom in the ancient times. So Kautilya's Arthashastra has provided a blueprint for the king to maintain his sovereign power. The sovereign power is the supreme power of the king is called as the sovereign power. So sovereign powers of the king are the main concern of Kautilya's Arthashastra. And further, Arthashastra also gives a scheme of administrative organization, how administration can be built up, the structure of administration, the hierarchical structure of administration, how it can be built from the macro level, the state capital, to the grassroots level, village level, how various steps of administrative units are to be built. So it has provided a clear cut of administrative organization. So that's also another important aspect of Arthashastra. In fact, there are so many modern political scientists and modern political practitioners who have studied Arthashastra and have reorganized themselves of their administrative organizations. So Arthashastra is a kind of a manual for a prince or the king or the rulers for maintaining administrative organization. So it has provided a scheme of administrative organization with all its principles like hierarchy, span of control, unity of command. And these are various principles behind administrative organization. So he has provided the administrative principles in Arthashastra. That's why Arthashastra cannot be considered just as a manual of political science. It is concerned with economics, it is concerned with sociology, it is concerned with public administration, and it is as well concerned with political science. So it's a work of interdisciplinary nature. So basically it has provided an administrative structure, an administrative organization for making the state more stable. So this is an important aspect. And Arthashastra is a treatise on statecraft. So it has provided the statecraft. That means it has divided and subdivided the administration into various compartments and departments. The criminal justice administration, the revenue justice administration, the judicial administration, the strategic administration, the administration related to local bodies, strengthening the local bodies. So this is how Arthashastra is a prominent work that has given a roadmap for the statecraft into compartmentalizing and departmentalizing the administration. So it's a treatise on statecraft. So this treatise on statecraft provides the rulers an on-hand knowledge about the maintenance of administrative relations, both with the people and also the employees. So it's a treatise on statecraft. And lastly, Arthashastra is a prominent work due to its concerns on separation of politics from religion and moral constraints. So it's really a rational work. It's a reasonable work. It has separated politics from religious moorings and also moral constraints. So it has separated politics from religion. It has separated politics from moral constraints. So this is how there is a clear-cut separation of politics from religion and morals. Morality is seen in Arthashastra. In fact, it is first ever work in ancient Indian philosophy to separate politics from religion and morality. That's why it is considered as a very rational and scientific work that has laid down principles on empirical nature, empirical findings, and it has separated politics from religion and moral constraints. So these are some of the concerns of Arthashastra, and due to all these concerns, Arthashastra is considered as a prominent work. So Arthashastra is a manual for administrator. It's a day-to-day manual for administrator, and it provides almost all the information about the administration, running of administration to the administrator, right from laying the taxes to maintaining law and order and criminal justice system and maintaining employees and appointment of employees, personnel administration. So various aspects of administration are covered in Arthashastra. That's why it is called as a manual for administrator. It's a very rule book or manual for administrator. So Arthashastra is prominent in all these aspects. So now let us see the lesson plan of our today's class. First, we'll discuss about Kautilya's views on state, state of nature, origin of state, and other things. And secondly, he has discussed about the social contract, how the king is elected, and how the king attains his legitimacy from the concerns and consensus of the people. So that's how the social contract and the terms of contract we'll discuss. And after that, as Arthashastra has discussed, the functions of state. What are the different functions of state that Arthashastra has mentioned? In fact, the functions of state can also be called as the Rajadharma. Rajadharma means the obligations of the king to perform. That's called as the Rajadharma or the functions of state. So here, the king and state are interchangeably used. King for Raja and state for Rajyam. So Raja and Rajyam are interchangeably used, and the functions of state can also be called as the functions of the king himself. So the functions of state are vividly described in Arthashastra. That's an important aspect. And we are going to discuss about the various functions that are mentioned in Arthashastra. And after that, we'll be discussing our main topic that's called the Saptanga theory of state. In the Saptanga theory of state, Arthashastra or Kautilya has mentioned about 7 elements for the state. The king, the minister, and the fort, the treasure, the allies, the Danda, and the friends. So they are some of the 7 elements of the state. So we'll be discussing about the 7 elements of state in separate subject-wise and element-wise discussion will be there on the Saptanga theory of state. After that, we'll also be discussing about the importance of Saptanga theory. Here we can make a comparison between Western theory of state and Indian theories of state, and how the Westerners have given only 4 elements to the state, and how Indians have expanded and elucidated the elements of state into 7 elements. So the importance of Saptanga theory also we'll be discussing. And after that, we'll be discussing about Kautilya's views on the institution of king, how a king should be elected, and what are the qualities of a king, and what are the functions of king. In the functions of state, we'll also discussing about the functions of king. Here again, in Kautilya's views on the institution of king, we'll be discussing about the election of king, the qualifications for attaining kingship, and also what are the various functions of the king. So this is how the lesson plan is drawn, and last we'll be discussing about the conclusion part. We'll give a summary of his Saptanga theory. Now I'll be discussing about the state, Kautilya's views on state. In fact, Saptanga theory believes that the state is an embodiment of all the morals. It's an embodiment of law and jurisprudence. So state is personified as dharma. So nobody should violate the state. People should be obedient to the state. People should be obedient to the state and also to the law. That's called as law obedience and obedience to state. So these are the 2 important aspects that Kautilya has discussed. And Kautilya, time and again in Arthashastra, has mentioned about the need to make the citizens and people to be obedient to the state and to the law. Law obedience and obedience to state are considered to be important ingredients of the state and the relations between the state and the people. So he starts the theory of state with the state of nature, how the state is formulated, how the state is originated. So to discuss about the origin of state, he starts with the state of nature. In the state of nature, he believes that all men are cruel, all men are selfish, all men are egoistic, all men are greedy, all people are self-centered. So these people lived in groups before the formation of state, when there was no political authority, when there was no formal political structure, when there is no formal political institutions. People only have lived in jungles or in the nature. So the life of people in the nature before the formation of state is called as the state of nature. In the state of nature, People are selfish, people are self-centered, people are egoistic, people are wicked, people are deceptive, people are egoistic. So such kind of people with that nature, people with dark nature or negative nature, only selfish needs guide their relations. So there was a kind of law of jungle prevailing in the state of nature. Law of jungle prevails. That means it is only the principle of might is right. Whichever is stronger, whichever is wealthier, whichever is prosperous, whichever is mightier, his word only will prevail. So all the people with the strength, all the strong people used to oppress the weak people. Like the strong animal oppressing the weak animal and take away its food. This is how the strong prevails over the weak. This is called as the law of jungle. So law of jungle prevailed in the state of nature. So in the state of nature, only the strong people, the will and wishes of the strong people prevailed over the weak people. So in such a case, people wanted a political authority, and people came to assemble at one place, and they made a contract among themselves. They made a contract among themselves and elected a king. So king is elected. King is selected and elected. The strong man in the society is chosen as a king. So here, an elected king is elected through people. And there was an agreement between the elected king and the people. So that agreement is called as the social contract. So the king has to oblige the demands of the people, and people have to be obedient to the principles and directives of the king. So there is an agreement, mutual agreement between the king and the people. So people have elected a king and they made a contract with the king. So this contract between the king and the people has lent legitimacy to the king, and it has given security to the people. The king wanted taxes from the people, and people wanted security from the king. So king wanted taxes, revenues from the people, and people wanted security for their lives, liberties, and properties. So this is how there is a mutual necessity. So this political expediency made the people to come to a contract and elect a king. So king is elected. King is the result of a social contract between the people and the king. So king draws his legitimacy from the concerns of the people, the consensus of the people. And people get their security from the king. So this is the agreement, and these are the terms of agreement. These are the terms of social contract. In the social contract between the king and the people, people have agreed to obey the commands of the king, and people have obeyed to respect the sovereign power of the king, and people have accepted the commands of the king, and people have promised to obey the laws passed by the king. So this is how people have promised the obedience, and king in turn has assured the people of their security, and king has provided security to the people, and people have lent their obedience, and they were ready to pay the taxes. So providing security is the duty of the king. On the part of the king has to provide security to the people. On the part of the people, they have to pay taxes to the government. So this is how an agreement is made between the rulers and the ruled. The ruled is the king. The ruler is the king, and the ruled are the people. So this agreement made the people to elect a new king. And this king ultimately personified the jurisprudence of the state. So after that, once the state is formed, the state is endowed with certain functions. In fact, Kautilya has discussed vividly about the functions of the state. Among the functions of state, Kautilya has mentioned about 4 types of functions. The first one is police functions. The second one is welfare functions. The third one is spiritual functions. And the fourth one is strategic functions. So in the police functions, The king is supposed to provide liberty and security to the people. He should protect the lives, liberties, and properties of the people. So that's called as the police function. In modern times, we call it as the law and order function or the police function. So this police function are protection of people, protection from internal sources and external sources, from internal rebellions, from internal uprisings, from internal disturbances, from internal anti-social elements, and from external aggressions, external wars. So the king has to protect the functions of the state, is to protect the people, and it has to assure the security and liberty to the people, and it should protect the lives, liberties, and properties of the people. So these are called as the police functions. The second one is the welfare functions. In the welfare functions, the king or the state is supposed to provide welfare to the people. Welfare is of two dimensions. Welfare at the individual level, welfare at the community level. At the community level, the state is supposed to maintain water resources, minor irrigation projects, major irrigation projects, rivers, lakes, ponds, and other things. And likewise, at an individual level, the state has to perform the functions of prevention of poverty in the state. So these are all the welfare functions. And the state also has to perform certain spiritual functions. In fact, in the ancient Indian society, the impact of religion was more rampant on the living patterns of the people. So people are spiritually obliged for the religion. That's why religious ceremonies or the spiritual functions have to be performed by the state itself, providing functions, religious functions like performing the yajnas, yagas, various pujas, worshippings is a function of the state. So they are called as the spiritual functions. And at times, the spiritual leaders are to be encouraged to enlighten the people on matters relating to this worldliness and other worldliness. So these are all the spiritual functions of the state. So the state has to perform the spiritual functions as well. And lastly, the state has to perform the strategic functions. In the strategic functions, the state should always be ready to wage wars with the neighboring kingdoms. And the state should always be in a position to extend its borders. So that's called as the state aggrandizement. The state aggrandizement is one of the objectives of the state. And Kautilya insists upon extension of borders. And Kautilya also suggested the king to wage wars against the neighboring kingdoms and against the kings who are not elect and extend the borders. By extending the borders and winning the wars, the legitimacy of the king can be doubled. So the king draws more legitimacy as a victor from the wars. So this is how Kautilya has mentioned about the strategic functions. And every king should maintain a standing army consisting of various compartments like horse power, camel power, elephant power, or army, ammunition, weapons, weaponry. So this is how a standing army should always be maintained for the safety and security of the state. So this is called as the strategic functions. As a matter of strategic importance, Kautilya also suggested war, espionage, and also foreign relations with the neighboring kings. At times, he has suggested a war with the neighboring kings. And at times, he has also mentioned about the application of espionage or secret police to draw information from the neighboring kingdoms. That's called as espionage activity. And the king should also maintain a standing army, and he should always be prepared to wage wars and also face the war. While he himself may have to wage the war, or if the neighboring kings wage a war, the king always should be ready to face the war. So this is an important strategic function of the king according to Kautilya. So Kautilya's Arthashastra mentions about the four important functions of the state: the police functions, the welfare functions, the spiritual functions, and the strategic functions. So after that, Kautilya mentions about the Saptanga theory. In the Saptanga theory, Kautilya mentions 7 elements for the state. As we have already seen, Kautilya has given a theory of state, stating that the state is originated as a result of an agreement among the people. King is elected by the people, and there was an agreement between the people and the king. And king has to provide security and safety to the people, and people have to pay taxes to the government as obediently as obedient citizens. So this is how there is an agreement between the people and the king, and the terms of agreement stands like the king has to provide safety and security to the people, and people have to pay their taxes duly to the king. So as a result of this agreement, the king is elected. So he says, king is the chieftain of the kingdom. Without king, there is no state. So king and state are synonymous. Without a king, there is no state. Without a state, there is no king. So that's why he mentions the king as the first element of the state. He says the Swami. Swami means the king. The second one is Amachya, that's the minister or Mantri Parishad. Third one is Janapada, population and territory. And fourth one is Durga, or fort. And fifth one is Kosha, treasury. Sixth one is Danda. Seventh one is Mitra. So this is how Kautilya mentions the 7 elements of the state. The first element being the king. He calls the king as the Swami. Swami means the guardian. The guardian of the people is called as Swami, or the owner of the people, owner of the kingdom is called as Swami. And secondly, he also mentions about Amatya, that's called as minister. In fact, Kautilya has suggested a group of ministers to advise the king. After all, king is also a human being. He may also commit errors, human errors. So to prevent human errors in the functioning of the kingdom, in the kingship, the king should be advised properly by a group of ministers. This group of ministers is called as the Mantri Parishad. This group varies from the state to state based on the extension of state. If the state is larger, there may be more ministers. If the state is geographically and territorially smaller, the Mantri Parishad may be limited to 3 or 4 people. So this is how Amatya are the minister, and there should be a group of ministers in every state. And these ministers are to be chosen based on their intellect, based on their scholarly acquisitions, based on their strength, and various aspects are to be taken into account while selecting the ministers. So minister or the group of ministers is the second important element of the Saptanga theory. And third important element is Janapada. Janapada means, Jana means people. Pada means Pradesh or territory. That's called population and territory. Population with the territory, territory with population is called as Janapada. Territory with population is called as Janapada. So, without population, territory no needs of a state. And without territory, people need not have any state. So, population and territory, these are the two important aspects. In fact, in the Western political thinkers, Western political theory, population and territory are separately mentioned. And population is one element and territory is another element. But Indian philosophy has merged both population and territory due to its connection. Without population, no territory. Without territory, no population. So this is how there is a clear, close relationship between population and territory. That's why he says, Janapada. Jana means people, Pada means territory. So the Indian political thought, ancient Indian political thought, has given the territory with population as an important element, as Janapada, to the state. And it is considered as an important element of the state. So this is one of the main elements of the Saptanga, the 7 elements of state. And here we see the king, and also we have people with territory. And the Saptanga theory also mentions about the fort. He calls it as Durga or fort. Fort means the place where the king has to reside, the king has to maintain his army, the king has to strategically look upon his enemies and their movements and strategic positions. So that is called as the Durga. Durga means a fort. Every state needs to have a fort. So without a fort, the state may not be stronger. That's why he insists upon having a Durga or the fort. Fort is an important element of the state. So in the Saptanga theory, the fourth important element of the state is called as Durga. Durga means fort. And after that, he also mentions about the Kosha. Kosha means treasury. Here, treasury means the place where the revenues are to be collected, revenues are to be stored, and all the valuable ornaments are to be deposited, and food grains are to be procured and deposited, and arms and ammunition has to be procured and secured, and procured and maintained. So the strategic place for keeping valuables, for keeping money, for keeping weaponry, for keeping ammunition, for keeping food grains is called as the Kosha. Kosha means the treasury. So treasury is an important element in the Saptanga theory. So this the fifth important element of the Saptanga theory. The first one being the Swami, second one is Amatya, the third one is Janapada, and fourth one is Durga, and fifth one is Kosha, and the sixth one is Danda. Danda means army. An army or a police force or an army force is required, both for internal purposes and external purposes. Internally, the crime and punishment has to be maintained to deter the people from entering into criminal nature. Furthest, you need to have police. Army acts as Danda, and there may be principles behind Danda, how to apply Danda, apply force against the people. That's called as Dandaniti. So the Arthashastra has also given about Danda and Dandaniti. So Danda, that means within the society, how anti-social elements, how the strong people, how the criminals, how the wicked people, how the greedy people are to be punished. So for punishing certain sections of people with negative behavior, we require Danda. And Danda also has a prominence in maintaining external sovereignty. Externally, the state has to protect itself, its independence, amongst the comity of nations and amongst the neighboring kingdoms. And it should not tolerate any external aggression, external war, or external interventions. So to protect itself, its sovereign rights, its sovereign powers, its political independence, a state need to have Danda. Danda means force. So this force is called as the army or Danda. So Danda is required both for internal purposes and external purposes. Internally, Danda is required for maintaining law and order, for deterring the criminals from entering into criminal nature, and deterring the anti-social elements, and protecting the weak, protecting the people, protecting the people's lives and liberties, and properties. With Danda is required internally. And externally, the state has to maintain its sovereign power, its political independence, its borders. So for that, Danda is required. So Danda, on the other hand, is also called as army, cavalry, infantry, arms and ammunition. All these things put together, Kautilya calls it as army, Danda. So Danda is an important element of state. Without Danda, the state cannot protect itself. In fact, Danda acts as a self-defense when external forces make an aggression on the native state, and it also acts as a catalyst in extending the borders of the state. When the king wants to extend his borders, he requires Danda, or the army. So this is how, both for the internal purposes and external purposes, the state need to have Danda, or the army. So Danda is an important element of Saptanga theory. And after that, he gives Mitra, or political ally, as an important element of Saptanga theory. Ally means every kingdom need to have a friend or a matured friend who can give good advices to the kingdom and the king for the maintenance of stability in the state. So king is always requiring a mitra, or the ally. So these are the 7 important elements of state according to the Western philosophy, the Indian philosophy. So these important elements are put together called as the Saptanga theory. The Saptanga theory states that Swami, Amatya, Janapada, Durga, Kosha, Danda, and Mitra are the 7 elements of state. In the Western political theory, we see population, territory, sovereignty, government, and international recognition. These are the only elements. They are the 4 important elements, and 5th element is not such an important element, it's an unimportant element. So these are the elements of Western theory. But Indian philosophy has categorically stated that a state need to have 7 elements. In fact, it calls them as organs. Anga. Anga means organ. As the state is a human body, these elements act as different parts of the body. Even if one part is dysfunctional or one part is non-existent, the whole state remains non-existent. That's why every part has its own role, and all the 7 parts have to function in a very positive manner for the functioning of political stability and attaining political stability and functioning of the state. So this is called as the Saptanga theory. The Saptanga theory says that every state needs to have 7 elements. One is the king, the Swami. Second one is Amatya. Amatya means the minister. The third one is Janapada. Janapada means population and territory. Territory with population. And fourth one is Durga. Durga means a fort. And fifth one is Kosha. Kosha means treasure. And sixth one is Danda, army. And 7th one is the Mitra, or the allies. So these are called as the Saptanga, the 7 elements of the state. So here we see a fort here. In the good olden days, ancient kingdoms, of course, even in medieval times and modern times also, till the Britishers have entered into India, kings used to build huge forts, like the Nizams have the Golconda fort. So these forts used to protect the kingdom strategically, and they also used to deposit the money, valuables, food grains, arms and ammunition that are required in a crisis situation. That's called as a fort. So here a great fort is given here. the picture of a port is also seen here. And likewise, the Saptanga theory states that every state needs to have a kosha or koshagar or treasury. And Danda, Danda means army. And Mitra, Mitra means allies. So these are the 7 important elements of the state. Now let us see what are his views on statecraft. In the statecraft, Kautilya has mentioned about the financial administration, judicial administration, diplomacy, warfare, espionage, and policy of acquisition of dominions. And he also stated the Mandala theory. So now let us discuss about various elements of statecraft. First of all, he mentions about the financial administration. This is also known as the revenue administration, in which he has suggested a system of taxation. He has suggested a system of taxation, and he has suggested that agriculturists are the farmers, traders, merchants, and employees of the kingdom, and also the laborers have to pay taxes to the government. And in turn, the government will protect the lives, liberties, and properties of the people. And likewise, he has also given judicial administration. He has separated the civil administration and criminal administration. And for making trials on crimes, he has separately suggested certain courts like Kantaka Shodhana Nyayasthan. Kantaka Shodhana Nyayasthan means criminal justice courts. So, of course, he has given a system of punishments which are very severe in nature. That's a different matter. But he has very vividly and widely has described about the punishment, the system of punishments, and how the cases are to be made a trial, and how the witnesses have to be examined and cross-examined, how the judicial process have to undergo, both in civil cases and criminal cases. And likewise, he has also mentioned about diplomacy, warfare, and espionage. In fact, Kautilya has given the concept of strategic relations among the states, in which he has suggested diplomacy. Peaceful resolution of conflicts is called diplomacy. And if peace is not there and peaceful resolution of conflicts is not possible, then warfare is inevitable, and the king has to engage himself in espionage activities to draw the sensitive information from the neighboring kingdoms. And likewise, Kautilya has suggested the king to acquire more dominions, more kingdoms, more neighboring kingdoms into the state. So this is called as the state aggrandizement. He has supported the policy of waging wars against the neighboring kingdoms. Thereby he can acquire new dominions, and as a result of this acquisition of new dominions, the legitimacy of the king can be strengthened and enhanced in the people. And lastly, he has also given the theory of the Mandala theory consisting of 12 kings. In the next class, we'll be discussing about the Mandala theory. So Mandala theory has given a blueprint on how the king has to plan himself for waging a war against his enemies. So Mandala theory is an important theory. Arthashastra has very widely and very detailed discussion about Mandala theory also. So this is all about the Saptanga theory. But the Saptanga theory and Arthashastra is criticized on various dimensions. First of all, its emphasis on war and acquisition of dominions is a point of criticism against Kautilya. In fact, India is considered as a peace-loving country, and how such a philosopher of the violent ideas on war and acquisition of dominions come in the ancient times. That's really puzzling. So, emphasis on war and his policy of acquisition of dominions has met with constant criticism. And secondly, in the criminal justice system and civil administration, civil justice system also, has suggested severe system of punishments. In fact, the jurisprudence always emphasizes on a right proportion between crime and punishment. If the crime is smaller, the punishment should also be smaller. If the crime is higher, the punishment should also be higher. There should be clear rational equality between crime and punishment. But contrary to this, Kautilya has suggested severe punishments even for petty crimes also. System of punishments met with criticism. And his separation of politics from ethics is also criticized. In fact, Kautilya has laid down emphasis on political expediency, and he says the king may be value neutral, ethical neutral, and moral indifference at times during the times of crisis. He need not follow the morals or values on all the concerns of stability of the state. So the separation of politics and ethics, separation of politics and morality also met with a lot of criticism. But in spite of these criticisms, Arthashastra is a very well documented treatise on statecraft. Particularly, its importance is more on the Saptanga theory. The Saptanga theory emphasizes on 7 elements of state: the king, the minister, the population with the territory, the Janapada, the fort, the Kosha or the treasury, the Danda, the army, and Eli, the Mitra. So friends, these are some of the important elements of the Saptanga theory. Thank you, friends. Thank you very much.